Although the Piazza Center and the primary focus of their legislation efforts are based here at Penn State, there are hazing laws now in 44 of the 50 states, which has led to safer campuses all across the country. Live in State College, I'm Eric Morris for CBS News Philadelphia. Although the Piazza Center and the primary focus of their legislation efforts are based here at Penn State and in Pennsylvania, their impact is felt nationwide, like here at LSU. However, as you can see behind me, the roads are mostly clear and the snowfall didn't amount to very much. And we have just hit totality. You might be able to hear the cheers. This is a very special moment. The State College Little Lions offense made its way to the end zone in just a split second. But this matchup that we're talking about right now, we're just 18 minutes away from tip, so get ready. We'll have the highlights for you next week on After the Whistle. Thanks, Joey. Let's take a look at that game now to see if the Little Lions would get revenge after last year's 47-20 loss in the first round of the 6A bracket. I've been following this story for the better part of the last month, but it hasn't been just me following it. All the local businesses around the area have been too, and they're taking this opportunity to cash in. Sophia and Ali, I think they will. This team, tough loss last week, but they still have everything in front of them. You win the last four, go 11-1, you'll probably host a playoff game in Beaver Stadium. Although the Piazza Center and the primary focus of their legislation efforts are based here at Penn State, there are hazing laws now in 44 of the 50 states, which has led to safer campuses all across the country. Live in State College, I'm Eric Morris for CBS News Philadelphia. Siafa and Natasha, back to you in the studio.
All right, Eric, thank you so much for sharing this story. We know you spent a lot of time with the family, got to know the Piazzas very, very well while working with them to put the story together. So how else are they honoring their legacy of their son at this point?
Yeah, they started a foundation using Tim's name where they host an annual golf outing. They raise money to fund prosthetics for both kids and veterans. It was a passion of Tim's and something in an industry that he intended to work in post-graduation. Although the family knows they're doing a lot of good, Jim Piazza did tell me himself that if he could have one thing, it would be to have his son back. Family photos bring back wonderful memories for Evelyn and Jim Piazza, including pictures of their two boys growing up in New Jersey. But not long after their son Tim went off to college at Penn State, it all came crashing down.
Once we got there and we met with the surgeons, I never in my wildest dreams ever thought that he was going to die.
19-year-old Tim Piazza died on February 4th, 2017 after an alcohol-fueled hazing incident at a campus fraternity house. The tragic story made national news. However, the Piazza family made a decision to try to turn that tragedy into something positive.
We felt an obligation. We had to do it because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Tim's brother Mike was also a Penn State student at the same time and the first person to see Tim at the hospital.
When I tell Tim's story, I do it from Mike's perspective, through his eyes. And I have everybody close their eyes and imagine that this is happening to their brother.
The Piazzas and their attorneys were key advocates in pushing Pennsylvania to pass what's considered to be the toughest hazing law in the United States.
We've come up with a model law that we've since shopped around to other states there's only 16 states right now that have felony hazing laws, and they've all been because there was a death first. So we're just trying to get states to protect their students.
Although the Piazza Center and the primary focus of their legislation efforts are based here at Penn State and in Pennsylvania, their impact is felt nationwide, like here at LSU. Kimberly Davis is a doctoral candidate in the Higher Education Administration program at LSU and serves as a data analyst for the Piazza Center.
Several of our campuses have are in states that have pretty strict and robust hazing laws. And as a result of those, we heard from students that really more than any sort of institutional policy, the laws are what changed their attitudes and behaviors.
44 of the 50 states now have an anti-hazing law. In New Jersey, it was the words of a young boy that made a difference.
One of Tim's best friends lived down the street from us, and his younger brother, as part of a Boy Scout project, wrote to a local state senator and said, we need to change the hazing law in New Jersey, and it was already a felony. He said, but we need to make it tougher because Tim was my friend too.
The Piazza's efforts have also been influential in new federal legislation that just took effect this year.
The fact that we were part of the Stop Campus Hazing Act that got passed on a federal level, I think that's huge.
Tim was an engineering major, and in addition to their anti-hazing work, the Piazza family began a foundation in Tim's name that holds a golf outing as a fundraiser to help achieve one of his goals.
We fund prosthetics, specialized prosthetics for kids. Tim really wanted to make prosthetics, and he wanted to help kids and veterans.
The family estimates they funded more than 200 kids for specialized prosthetics, including running blades or attachments to allow them to ride bikes.
That makes us happy because that is something that I think carries on Tim's legacy.
But no matter how much good the family does, nothing can make up for what they lost.
I would say it's satisfying. Of course, you're doing some good stuff, hopefully, and making a difference, but I mean, I'd rather have my son back.
No, you're not running your business right.
A standing room only crowd gathered this week in Bellefonte for a public hearing on buses. Catago and Cataride services have rapidly grown in popularity over the last couple of years, so much so they're operating at a deficit. Cata says the losses are unsustainable. For instance, in Bellefonte, the total number of trips provided for 2022-23 was 41,100. That was at a cost of almost $672,000. Even with subsidies, fares, and local matches totaling almost $450,000, that left a deficit of nearly $223,000. That's a $5.41 loss per ride.
And we pay for that service by the hour from a contractor, so we can really scale that service depending on how much money they're able to put into the system. So we've been talking about a number of different options based on what they can afford.
Although Cata will continue to provide service for a couple of hours in the mornings and afternoons, many of those who are affected are concerned that the new system won't provide enough options for those who are in need. The crowd at the Armory building spoke out on changes to Cata service in Bellefonte, along with Spring and Benner townships. Many voiced their concerns, told stories of Cata's importance in their daily lives, and asked questions that went unanswered. Some told us township supervisors from the 3 municipalities were not in attendance.
They're not here because it doesn't affect them. And so it's frustrating. And so they should be engaged, and they should be involved in this discussion. It's important. A lot of people's lives are going to be affected.
However, a Spring Township representative told us he was there, but didn't have an opportunity to speak. Our requests for comment from the other supervisors have not been returned. In Bellefonte, I'm Eric Morris for the Center County Report. On the streets of London and Edinburgh, most people will tell you they're keeping a close eye on the U.S. election.
I think it's like often the top news story every single day, which I actually kind of think is frustrating.
And it doesn't matter if they're older or younger.
I know about Project 2025, like we know about those things here, and we're like, okay, that's a terrible news for the climate and for all people all over the world, because what the U.S. does obviously impacts us.
For Europe, what happens in America matters.
400 million Europeans can't vote in the U.S. election, but it's still an election they have to really care about. And so that's why you're seeing as much coverage as you are.
Mark Landler is the London bureau chief of the New York Times.
Everyone in Europe understands that the outcome of the U.S. election will have direct consequences for them.
The British held their own major election in July, with voters overwhelmingly tossing the conservative Tories out of office for the first time in 14 years. They say it's a part of a global anti-incumbent feeling by voters.
The big theme globally is kind of throw the bums out. That's what voters all over the world in many different countries, different political systems, there's this kind of general pent-up frustration.
It's a frustration many say is also building here at home. But after President Joe Biden dropped out of the race, that anti-incumbent flavor has a different taste in the U.S.
I think if Biden had not withdrawn when he did, the election in the U.S. would have shaped up as a much more straight anti-incumbent election. For Kamala Harris, you slightly remove the incumbent flavor from it.
Historically, the two nations have parallels with election results including Bill Clinton and Tony Blair in the 90s, as well as Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. So, what can we learn in 2024?
The Labor government won by running on a platform of we'll be more competent, we'll be more steady, we won't be corrupt, we won't be erratic. I think that the Democrats are trying to do some of the same things. And so to that extent, I think that the Labor victory gives them something of a blueprint.
It's a similar approach that was taken in 2020, which saw Joe Biden win the presidency. However, this time they'll have to fight the anti-incumbent trend that conservatives are campaigning on. In the United Kingdom, I'm Eric Morris for the Centre County Report.